In Nottingham's Bestwood estate, two brothers, Colin and David Gunn, built a name for themselves back in the 90s. Born into estate life back then, they learned early how to prosper. But soon, they weren't just surviving, they were running things. Colin's reputation preceded him as a fighter, earning him the nickname Knuckles, often only needing one punch to finish the job. David was every bit as dangerous. He spent 3.5 years in prison for killing a man with one punch, and in another incident, he left a man permanently disfigured. Together, they started small, petty crimes, but they had bigger plans. By the late 90s, they were suspected to be involved in drugs, making moves that would take them from street-level deals to running the show. Some claimed the brothers had also branched out into extortion. They controlled Bestwood Estate. People knew not to cross them. The Gunns didn't mess around. They had money, muscle, and enough fear in the streets to keep everyone in line. But when you're on top, everyone's watching, and every step forward comes with a bigger risk. The Gunns weren't just two brothers anymore. They were running a cartel. In the late 90s, the Gunn brothers transformed their street-level hustles into an empire, the Bestwood Cartel. Their operations extended beyond the Bestwood estate, reaching into Bulwell and Arnold, solidifying their presence in Nottingham's underworld. Colin Gunn, leveraging his experience as a doorman, identified the lucrative potential of supplying recreational drugs to clubgoers. This venture marked the cartel's entry into the drugs trade, setting the stage for their expansive drug distribution network. By the late 1990s, the Bestwood Cartel had branched out. They were said to be engaged in extortion, collecting protection money from local businesses. Pubs like the Scots Grey became central to them and their activities. The cartel's influence was enforced through a combination of fear and violence. Incidents of brutal punishment shootings between rival gangs became commonplace in the areas around that time. Despite their criminal activities, the Gunn brothers portrayed themselves as protectors of their community. They provided financial assistance to local residents and sponsored community events. However, their reign was not without challenges. Law enforcement agencies, recognizing the escalating violence and criminal activities, launched operations aimed at dismantling the cartel. Undercover officers infiltrated the group. The gang was active at a time when a series of incidents led to Nottingham being given a chilling new label. In these times, reputation was everything for the gangs. A single slight could ignite a deadly chain of events. This is what happened to Marvin Bradshaw, a man whose life was tragically cut short by a vendetta born from a bruised ego. August 30th, 2003. The Sporting Chance pub in Bulwell is alive with the hum of late-night revelers. Among them is 22-year-old shopfitter Marvin Bradshaw, unwinding after a long week. Seated beside him is his close friend, Jamie Gunn, the nephew of notorious Colin Gunn. Earlier that evening, Michael J.J. O'Brien, 22, and his associate Gary Salmon, 31, had been denied entry to the pub. Their attire, trainers and a tracksuit top, didn't meet the dress code. A scuffle ensued, and O'Brien was struck in the face, possibly with an ashtray. Humiliated and seething, they retreated to Salmon's nearby flat. Inside the flat, rage festered. They changed into dark clothing, gloves and balaclavas, and grabbed a single-barreled shotgun. Their target, the individual who had dared to humiliate O'Brien. Unaware of the danger, Marvin and Jamie decided to call it a night. They left the pub and got into Marvin's Renault Laguna. As the car edged out of the car park, a figure emerged from the darkness. Then, a deafening shotgun blast shattered the night. Marvin was hit in the head. Jamie, seated beside him, was stunned and covered with shattered shards of glass. O'Brien and Salmon immediately fled the scene, and the quiet that followed the blast was soon interrupted by police sirens closing in. Marvin was rushed to the hospital, but later died of his injuries. An innocent life extinguished by a brutal act of mistaken identity. In the ruthless world of gangland Nottingham, one wrong move can seal your fate. And for Marvin Bradshaw, a night out with friends became a death sentence. This shooting would go on to influence a series of events, eventually leading to the downfall of the Gunn brothers. In the aftermath, Jamie Gunn's life took a tragic turn. Although physically uninjured in the attack, the emotional toll was profound. Struggling to cope with the trauma, Jamie turned to alcohol and drugs, leading to a rapid decline in his health. His family observed a marked deterioration, noting that he was never the same after the incident. In July 2004, O'Brien stood trial at Nottingham Crown Court, where he denied the charge of murder. However, the jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a recommendation to serve a minimum of 24 years. By August 2004, Jamie's condition had worsened significantly. He fell ill with pneumonia at the age of 19, and days later, he was dead. His family attributed his death to the trauma of the shooting. Gary Salmon evaded capture for over 2 years, but was eventually caught and brought to trial. In January 2007, he was convicted of the murder of Marvin. The court heard that Salmon had provided the firearm and participated in the planning and execution of the attack. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 17 years before eligibility for parole. These events set off a chain reaction of retribution within Nottingham's gangland. Colin Gunn was out for revenge. In the wake of the attack and the jailing of O'Brien, his associates and friends came under attack. Several people linked to them were targeted with firebombs and homemade hand grenades. But it was O'Brien's parents that were to bear the brunt of the anger. John and Joan Stirland's lives were about to become collateral damage in a feud that began with an argument at a pub. The Stirlands were ordinary people. Both retired, John and Joan, a former nurse, were not part of the underworld. But their son, Michael O'Brien, had put them in the firing line by pulling the trigger on Marvin Bradshaw. Colin Gunn blamed the Stirlands for his nephew's decline and death, vowing to take revenge through violence. In the months following O'Brien's arrest, the Stirlands became targets. The windows of their Carlton home were shot out by an unknown moped rider in 2004, a warning that things were far from over. Terrified, the couple abandoned Nottingham, leaving behind their lives and friends, hoping to outrun the shadow of the Gunn empire. They found sanctuary in Trusthorpe, Lincolnshire, a quiet seaside village nearly 80 miles away. But their new life was anything but peaceful. Gunn's network was vast, and revenge became his obsession. He deployed his men to track them down, and by early August 2004, their location was compromised. August 8, 2004. A quiet Sunday afternoon in Trusthorpe. Joan Stirland was pouring tea in their small bungalow, while John sat in his favourite armchair reading the paper. A loud knock at the door startled them both. It was unusual in the sleepy village. Moments later, a black Volkswagen Passat rolled into the driveway. 2 men dressed in boiler suits and caps exited the vehicle. Armed and loaded, they approached the home at speed. As Joan set the teapot down on the table, The sound of glass shattering filled the room. A gunshot ripped through the window, narrowly missing her. She screamed, the teacup slipping from her hand and smashing on the tiled floor. John tried to reach her, but before he could, the gunman had breached the door. Within seconds, they fired again. Joan was hit and collapsed to the floor. John was next. He tried to fight back, but it was futile. A single, point-blank shot to the head ended his life. It was later revealed that earlier, on the day of the murders, Joan had made 2 phone calls to police, complaining about a prowler outside their bungalow. The murders shocked the nation. Local residents described the killings as something out of a crime film. After the murders of John and Joan Stirland, police escalated their efforts to dismantle the cartel. Operation Starburst, led by the National Crime Squad, targeted Colin Gunn and his closest allies. Every move was monitored, every conversation scrutinized. But the Gunns didn't go down easily. To counter the growing police pressure, Gunn turned to corrupt Nottinghamshire police officer Charles Fletcher. Fletcher leaked confidential information to Gunn, feeding him updates on investigations and helping the cartel stay one step ahead. Fletcher, at the young age of 19, was reportedly being paid £2,000 per month by Gunn, in addition to his police salary. He later pleaded guilty to corruption charges and was jailed for 7 years. The corruption ran so deep that Gunn even knew when surveillance was being conducted on his associates. Police knew they were facing a criminal organization with a reach unlike anything Nottingham had seen before. Gunn claims a pin was fired through his letterbox into his carpet by MI5 to spy on what he was saying and doing in his house. The device could hear every conversation within a 100-meter radius, even whispers. In March 2005, after a comprehensive investigation, authorities apprehended Colin Gunn. The police considered that they had enough evidence. Gunn was subsequently charged with conspiracy to murder the Stirlands. Simultaneously, in Nottingham, raids on the Bestwood estate rounded up the cartel's enforcers. Drugs, firearms, and mountains of cash were seized, dismantling the infrastructure that had fueled the cartel's power. The trial of Colin Gunn and his associates was one of the most highly anticipated in Nottingham's history. Prosecutors painted a damning picture of a man who had ruled through fear and violence, ordering murders and running a criminal empire that had turned Nottingham into a war zone. In 2006, Colin Gunn was found guilty of conspiracy to murder John and Joan Stirland. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. His ally Charles Fletcher, the corrupt police officer, was also convicted and sentenced to 7 years for misconduct. John Russell, 29, of Northcote Way, Nottingham, was jailed for a minimum of 30 years. Michael McNee was also found guilty and sentenced to a minimum term of 25 years. David Gunn was found not guilty by the jury, but weeks after being cleared of killing the Stirlands, he was jailed for 8.5 years for conspiracy to supply. The fall of the Bestwood Cartel wasn't just the end of a gang, it was the end of an era. For years, the Gunn brothers had ruled Nottingham, their names spoken with equal parts fear and respect. But their empire collapsed under the weight of their own violence. For years, Nottingham had the Shottingham tag, a city where life was cheap and violence was the currency of power. At the center of it all were the Gunn brothers, Colin and David. They built an empire on fear, running the Bestwood Cartel with an iron grip. But every empire eventually falls. Colin Gunn is now serving life in prison, with no chance of release for a long time. David Gunn, once feared as much as his brother, now reflects on the path they chose. "I urge people to stay away from crime. Don't end up like me and Colin," he said. It's advice born from experience. Two brothers who tore through the city and lost their freedom. Shottingham's streets are quieter now. Life goes on, and new faces appear, all wanting their shot at running things. But for every rise, there's a fall. The question is, when it all catches up to them, will it have been worth it? For more raw and real crime stories, hit the like button and subscribe. Until the next episode, stay alert and stay safe.